Welcome everybody to this morning's special meeting of Cabinet. It's just gone 9:30. The meeting's being held under the regulations which came into effect on the 4th of April 2020 in response to the COVID-19 situation. My name's Councillor Lucille Thompson and I'm Chair of this committee and Leader of the Council. Just a few housekeeping reminders to run through. First of all, can I ask everyone present in this virtual meeting that your microphones remain muted and your camera is turned off whilst you're not addressing the meeting. This cuts down background noise. Please can I also advise that the open parts of the meeting are being audio recorded and live streamed from the Council's website. In addition to a video recording of the meeting will be uploaded to the Council's YouTube channel shortly after the meeting. Cabinet members and officers, where appropriate, for each item, can you use the chat function of the meeting to indicate that you wish to speak or raise a point of order or explanation, and I will then invite you to speak at the appropriate time. Each member will be invited to speak in turn, therefore I would encourage all members to keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible. When speaking and referring to the agenda papers, please make sure that you reference the page or paragraph number. Thank you. Please note that the duration of this virtual meeting is 2 hours and any business not conducted after this time will be deferred to an alternative date or to the next meeting. Can we also be aware that today is a Tuesday and there is a fire alarm test scheduled for 10 o'clock this morning in the city offices, which is where this cabinet meeting is being broadcast. So don't worry if that fire alarm goes off at that time. Finally, if cabinet members wish to leave the meeting at any point, could they please make themselves known to me through the chat function, and I will announce to the meeting that you are to leave. So can I now ask Nancy, the Democratic Services Officer, to undertake a roll call of members of Cabinet to confirm who is present this morning?
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Present.
Councillor Cutler.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Ferguson.
Good morning, present.
Councillor Lerney.
Good morning, present.
Councillor Murphy.
Good morning, present.
Councillor Porter.
Good morning.
Councillor Prince.
Hi, present.
And Councillor Todd.
Good morning, present.
That's all members of Cabinet. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Can I also now ask you to read out a list of the officers present on this call today?
Thank you. In addition to the people in the room, well, we have Laura Taylor and Catherine Knight, Rachel Robinson and myself, Nancy Graham, in the room, and also on the call, bear with me a second, Richard Botham, Chaz Bradfield, Verianne Lyons, and Carol Stefanchuk. And apologies if I've missed anybody else, but if you can announce your name as you speak, that would be brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, apologies for absence. I don't think we have any apologies, so we'll move swiftly on. Membership of cabinet bodies. I don't believe there are any amendments to any of cabinet bodies. Item number 3 is disclosure of interest. Have any members of cabinet got any disclosures to make?
Thank you. Councillor Porter, I have a personal interest because I'm also a county councillor, but I don't believe there's anything relevant on today's agenda.
Likewise as Councillor Todd, I'm also a county councillor and there are arguably some highways related issues, which is a county responsibility in some cases, but again, it's personal and not prejudicial.
Thank you very much. we now come to item number 4, requests for invited councillors. I have a large list of councillors who wish to speak on the 2 items before us today, and I will call you as and when we come to those papers, if that's okay. Thank you. So item number 5 is now public participation. And again, I have a number of members of the public who do wish to speak. I am going to be quite strict about the 3-minute rule, because otherwise I think we will run over our time. So I'd like to call on John Ferry first, who is speaking on item 8 on the agenda. Mr. Ferry, can you unmute your microphone and put your camera on and address us, please? Mr. Ferry, are you there?
Hello?
Hello.
Yes, I can hear you now. Whoops. No,
That's
no.
right, and we can see you too.
I've just lost you, but just hold on a moment. Wonders of technology. Okay. Yes. Okay. So my concern is the taxi policy, or the review of it, about which you are probably making decisions today. I sit on the taxi forum with Winchester City Council, and obviously we've had discussions about various matters that you are also considering, and that I'm perhaps in a slightly unique position in that I run a private hire business doing exclusively school work for Hampshire County Council, that being the case, the mileage that my vehicles do is much lower than Hackney drivers in Winchester and other private hire drivers doing airport work and other private hire work. So I am very against the idea of putting a finite age on vehicles. It would actually make my business unviable. I run older vehicles, big vehicles, well, not big, but 8-9-seater vehicles and 6-seater vehicles, transporting children from rural areas into secondary and primary and infant schools. We need these small vehicles to get up and down the country lanes and round the farms and to the farms to pick up the children to take them to the schools. My oldest vehicle, 14 years old, and has just done 100,000 miles. There's plenty of life left in it. My other vehicles are a bit younger and have done less miles. There is not enough money in the business for me to be renewing vehicles to cover this end of life proposal. So I'm, against that, and I think, although I understand the reasoning behind it for vehicles that are operating within the city of Winchester, it's irrelevant to what I'm doing, and therefore I would oppose it. Other councils in other parts of the country have come up with solutions to this for operators like myself. I have put those, I have pointed the licensing officers at Winchester in the direction of the websites of those councils, and I've actually had contact with myself, and they have found a way around this, and it needs some innovation from the licensing officers at Winchester to allow people like me to stay in business, and also to keep local people employed. 7 people are either directly or indirectly employed by my business, all who would find it difficult to find jobs out in the countryside if they weren't working for me. So it needs some slightly lateral thinking, and I hope that councillors will consider that, and that the licensing officers will take on board the emails that I've sent them in the past. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ferry, and we will be coming to that item a bit later on the agenda, and I'm sure Councillor Porter will address the points that you've raised then. Do feel free to continue to stay on the call if you wish, or alternatively you can listen to it at the link on our website. But thank you very much for your contribution. I now move to the speakers who wish to speak on item 7. And first up, I have Kim Gottlieb. Kim, have you managed to get in? Are you there?
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Lucille. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you. Yes, indeed. There are several issues that cause concern, but the best way to describe this proposal is that, in effect, the council is asking a fox to guard the henhouse. The natural instinct of a developer is to maximise the financial return from the development, and all the smiles and promises in the world won't change this basic fact. If the council is sincere about following the SPD and about the public realm and the cultural and social opportunities, then it must retain control of the site and produce a master plan which sets out the public benefits in a far more definitive way. A master plan would include a design code and ensure that critical issues such as traffic, archaeology and the waterways are all resolved. This is not the work of a profit-motivated developer, but of a consultant such as JTP or Adam Architecture, who would work for the council and look to achieve the best outcome for the site and not be looking at what's in it for themselves. Critically, this proposal ignores the stipulation in the SPD that there should be multiple developers, the idea being that this would avert the uniform design and monolithic outcome that was previously avoided only because I challenged it. The description of the joint venture arrangement with the developer is far too vague for anyone to make a competent decision about this proposal. All I know is that all the language is all the same as put out by the council in respect of Thornfield and Henderson. To achieve success, the council has two options. Either it gets an expert master planner to flesh out the SPD into a detailed scheme, or it delegates that task to a community development corporation or trust, which could comprise of locally based architects, planners, developers and the like. Then and only then should the site be parcelled out to several different developers, although I still think that the council should retain as much of the investment as it possibly can. On the associated issue of King's Walk, there is much to praise it, but the first thing I note is that the proposal by Turner Works puts the work by the council's other consultants in the shade. They should be applauded for that, and Cabinet should take careful note. However, I think it would be a mistake to effectively sterilise the site for 10 years and to retain King's Walk for that period or longer. That shows a lack of ambition, and Winchester really does deserve better. All in all, the proposal for Silver Hill is too vague and inadequate, and it's far too full of pitfalls, and I would really encourage you as strongly as I possibly can to go back and rethink again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've made a note of your comments, as I'm sure others on Cabinet have too, and we will be coming to that paper shortly. I now call on Wendy Wyatt to address the meeting, please. Wendy, are you there?
I'm here.
Hello, good morning.
Hello, hi. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Wendy Wyatt of Worthwhile Works, and I'm the co-author of the King's Walk report. My approach was reflecting from different perspectives. As a resident of 15 years, a mother and volunteer. 10 years ago, I founded a business here, and recently a non-profit, and will launch Winchester Design Festival next year. I've lived all over the UK and moved from London, where I was a creative industries advisor to the Mayor of London and worked in the record industry. I'm an outsider on the inside, or maybe now I'm an insider from the outside. I have credentials and authority to talk about creative regeneration, and I've seen firsthand the incredible transformation it can give a place. A lot has changed in 15 years since I moved here. The world has changed, the high street has changed, and business has changed. Instagram hadn't been invented. Facebook was only 1 year old. Google was in 2nd grade and Amazon in 4th. Many towns and cities have adapted to think creatively and get their act together. But Winchester, as one stakeholder in a report observed, is being left behind. But there is hope on the horizon. In some ways, it is easier than ever to start a business. Opportunities are wide open, whatever your age or circumstance. And with so much information at our fingertip 24/7, everyone has a fair crack of the whip. But it can also be hard and lonely, especially in Winchester. There are few creative networks, virtually no creative meetups, no creative support organisations, little creative training, no creative or cultural leadership, and no central signposting to those new to the game. I know from experience how much is going on in other towns and cities. The UK is buzzing with creative networks, just not here. Everyone sits in silo, which is frustrating. I hear it over again. Everyone wants the same thing. We want to collaborate, to showcase, attract and retain talent, to grow our business, and we want jobs. Winchester had more creative people working here than Southampton and Portsmouth combined, 5,000 jobs to be exact. It's a DCMS recognised creative cluster for architecture and digital, and 500 architects work here, and that's pretty amazing. The creative industries are a real asset to Winchester, but they live in the shadows. This is where King's Walk can help, as a magnet, a signpost, a beacon. It's a brilliant opportunity to shine a spotlight on the talent here, to support it, promote it, and nurture it. It will act as a catalyst for sure. I've seen it happen elsewhere and it can happen here. I wouldn't advocate a creative enterprise zone unless I believed there was demand and need from our community, and there is both in abundance. Please give it a chance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wendy. And as I've said to previous speakers, do feel free to stay on the call if you have time and listen to the debate when we get to this item, or by all means click off and listen on the audio recording, which is going out live as we speak. But thank you very much for your contribution. I'd now like to call on Richard Baker to address the meeting, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Richard Baker and I'm speaking on behalf of the City of Winchester Trust. It's now 2 years and 4 months since the adoption of the supplementary planning document for the central area. The Trust has 3 questions regarding the Central Winchester Regeneration proposal going out for consultation. The first question is, the proposal sets out illustrative phasing, a proposed mix of uses, delivery options and many images. What response is the Council hoping to receive on these issues? The second question is, on page 42 of the report, it states that the viability testing demonstrates that the proposed mix of uses results in a viable scheme. Has this viability testing included an assessment of uses that the City Council as a landowner will be allocating on the cattle market site, station approach and River Park, together with the impact that the pandemic has had on the economic life of the city centre? And finally, the third question. Last Thursday, Atkins presented options and proposals for implementing the movement strategy. At what stage before the preparation of a master plan will the Council engage with this strategy to set out detailed traffic, pedestrian, cycling, access, bus and coach route arrangements around the site, along Friarsgate and the Broadway? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baker. And as I've said previously, I'm sure some of the questions that you've asked will be addressed during the item when we come to it on the agenda. Excuse me. I'd now like to invite Terry Gould to address the meeting. Mr. Gould, can you unmute yourself and put your camera on? Terry, are you there? Is Terry in the meeting?
He was there, Chair. I don't know if you wanted to go to Paul Spencer, and then we'll see if we can find out what's happened to.
Okay. In that case, I don't think we can contact Mr. Gould at the moment. I'm not quite sure what's happened. So can I call on Paul Spencer, please, who's representing the Winchester bid, to join the meeting, please, and address us?
Morning.
Good morning.
My name's Paul Spencer. I'm Executive Director of Winchester Business Improvement District. The bid would like to make this meeting aware of the desire of many, many businesses in the city centre to see Central Winchester Regeneration move forward. We encourage the Cabinet to approve the commencement of a period of consultation on the draft development proposals and to instruct the project team to progress schemes for Kings Walk and Friarsgate Medical Centre to the next stage of decision making. We've been very pleased to participate in the Winchester Vision work recently with the Winchester Town Forum. A theme which has emerged very strongly is the desire of local people to see progress on projects which as a city we've been trying to progress for a long time. The Winchester Vision work has highlighted that both leaders and locals recognise that attempts to progress some key projects in the city centre have been unsuccessful in the past, and the city has missed out because of this. And therefore there's a real pressure to get it right, but also a real desire to see progress. The Winchester Vision work also suggests that people in Winchester are weary of consultations which do not lead to results for the city. And therefore, if they participate and take time to share their views, they want to see results. So there is a real pressure not only to get it right, but also to get something done. A lot of effort in recent years has been spent trying to decide what new buildings or developments to place on different sites around the city, Central Winchester Station approach, and now we're also starting to think about the future of the space occupied by River Park Leisure Centre building. A quote from one of the researchers in the Winchester Vision document says, "It's become clear to us that in almost every conversation that there is a sense of transition, transformation, moving forward, being thwarted, that something was stopping the city from making changes, that Winchester has a systemic problem with change. This is despite us having a city full of engaged people that want to help shape the place where they live and work and see change. So let's break the cycle and move forward together and take the next step to deliver change and not leave Central Winchester Regeneration, the Central Winchester Regeneration area empty and sad, but take the next steps towards realising its potential as a vibrant mixed-use destination." Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Spencer. Right, so I'll just give a last call to Terry Gould. If he's on the line, would he like to address the meeting? Hello?
He's muted, Chair.
Ah.
He might need to unmute himself.
Okay, Mr. Gould, you need to unmute yourself. No, I'm not hearing anything. What do you suggest we do?
I think, Chair, one more call out for Mr. Gould, otherwise you may wish to proceed with the meeting.
Mr. Gould, are you there? This is the final call for you to be able to participate in the meeting. Otherwise, we're going to have to move on, I'm afraid. No? No?
No,
Okay.
I'm afraid.
Okay. Well, perhaps, Mr. Gould, I'm sorry we've had to move on, but if you have comments to make, perhaps you could send them to us in an email. That would be great. Right, so that finishes the public speaking on this item, and item number 6 is leader and cabinet member announcements. I have no announcements to make. I don't believe members of cabinet have any, but just to check, cabinet members, have you any announcements to make? No,
thank you, Leader.
No, thank you very much. We'll now move on then to the paper on item number 7, Central Winchester Regeneration Development Proposals, CAB 3271. And I call on Councillor Lerney to introduce the paper, please.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a rather long introduction, but I'm sure you'll appreciate that this is one of the biggest issues facing the city, and something which deserves a considerable period of time spent on it. Despite COVID pressures, work on moving forward with regeneration of the central Winchester area has remained a priority for the council. We've been working hard to put together a proposal which is capable of achieving the aspirations of the supplementary planning document, meeting our local plan objectives around sustainability, a vibrant local economy and homes for all, while at the same time being financially viable. There has been frustration about how long this is taking, and I actually share that, but I am afraid that it's inevitable with a scheme this complex in a historic city. But we are now able to demonstrate not only how the site can be developed incrementally and allow us to deliver aspects of the scheme at an early stage, and as part of that, Cabinet are being asked to approve additional work towards the reinvention of King's Walk and investigating the demolition of Friars Gate, in addition to starting consultation on the development proposals. We are very conscious of the mistakes that have been made in the past, and risk management is an important part of the process. The paper and the risk appendix run through the main considerations. We are in a different position now. The council owns most of the site with a few exceptions and is in a much stronger position to control development and set out must-have requirements on any development partner. We will cover delivery models and why our emerging delivery strategy is to procure a suitable development partner in more detail later. The paper runs through the considerable engagement that took place in both developing the SPD and in moving the SPD from a planning document towards a development scheme. And we're very grateful to all of those who've participated over a considerable period of time. In working on the development proposals before us, we've constantly gone back to the key objectives in the SPD. Now, I have my very well thumbed copy of it here, and that's creating the vibrant mixed use quarter, Winchesterness, which is a phrase I still hate, but I think we all have an idea of what that means, creating that exceptional public realm, creating new city experiences, sustainable transport, incremental delivery, housing for all, community and climate change and sustainability. In addition, we've been very clear throughout the past couple of years that development needs to comply with the constraints set out in the SPD in connection to height, scale and massing. Changing circumstances, including changes to the nature of the high street and the aspiration to create a truly creative quarter, have led to a slight variation, which is that the retail proposed is slightly less than the quantum in the SPD. However, mixed uses, the workspace, culture and leisure uses are at the upper end of the quantum. And we do expect some of that workspace to include a specialist retail offer, for example, artists selling from their studios. We know that city centre housing and workspace are key to supporting the health and vibrancy of a modern town centre. Those who are here every or most days are the ones who spend most in our shops, eat most regularly in our restaurants, use our gyms and yoga studios and create that buzz we want to see throughout the day and well into the evening. At the same time, centres that are attractive to local people are also more attractive to visitors, who extend their stays from a few hours to see a cathedral to a whole weekend. We will never have a better opportunity than this to create an area which promotes the local economy, encourages younger people to stay here, and makes us all want to spend time in our city centre. And I'm really excited that we're now at a point where we can make a considerable step forward with a project which can make such an impact. At this point, I'd like to ask Verian Lyons, our Programme Director, to run through the presentation which shows our proposals for how the scheme can be laid out, how it can be delivered incrementally, and the delivery options. So Verian, over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Lerney. I think hopefully we should have the slides coming up on screen fairly shortly, and what I will do is run through those with you. I won't do the full presentation, Chair and Councillor Lerney, because it will take sort of 35 to 40 minutes, but I will talk through the presentation and highlight the key aspects of that. The information will be available on our website after today, and also available throughout the consultation period on our virtual exhibition room, and we can talk a little bit more about that at the end of the presentation. So the presentation that we've got that we want to share with you is all around how we want to bring forward development in the central Winchester regeneration area. So the slides will contain the following list of content. So we will talk a little bit around the timescales. We'll look at not only the SPD guidance and how the proposals fit to and align with those aspirations and objectives of the SPD, but we will also take a look at why we're suggesting that the proposals are geared towards a younger and family age group. We will then look at the challenges that the site has presented and will present going forward, together with how we can evolve the planning guidance of the SPD, evolve that into a development proposal that delivers all those objectives. And also we can look at the uses and the quantum of uses across the site, together with some of the emerging ideas on what the scheme could look like and how we want to deliver it. So the first sort of information slide will be the timescales, and this really is just to put into perspective where we've been and where we have yet got to go with the project. Obviously, we know the SPD was adopted in June 2018. We have been doing a lot of work since then. This slide will show exactly where we are now. We're entering into that period of consultation, so that in February of next year, we would like to come back to Cabinet for approval of the development proposals. And you can then see on the timeline slide all the various different steps that we will then be taking. The next slide after the timescale slide looks at reminding people to the challenges Winchester has around the demographic and the age population. We're gearing the Central Winchester Regeneration Scheme towards the younger generation, because you can see from these slides that we've got a high proportion of younger people and a high proportion of older people, but in the middle, our sort of demographic of working age groups falls away. So the next couple of slides will go into that, and throughout the presentations in the consultation period, I will be talking through these slides in more detail. We've got the next slide, again showing a little bit about age and what that looks like in 10 years time. And then the next slide also identifies and sums up the other key drivers for the Central Winchester site, which is, as Councillor Lerney has mentioned, we've got a high proportion of day visitors, but they tend not to stay overnight and spend their money in the evenings in the city. So we want to provide a destination that not only attracts and provides inspiration for our creative community and our younger generation, but it provides a destination for visitors, not just to come for the day, but to stay overnight and spend their money and enjoy what Winchester has to offer on the Central Winchester site. Very much coupled with that, as Councillor Lerny has said, we are being guided by the planning guidance set out in the SPD. You can see there the vision. We all probably know the vision off by heart by now. And we are also really comfortable and really aware of the 9 objectives that the SPD sets out. Again, Councillor Lerny did mention them just now, but these are the 9 objectives: the vibrant mixed-use quarter, Winchesterness, going right the way through to that sense of community and climate change and sustainability. So the proposals that we have sort of developed and we are sharing with people now not only achieve all those objectives, but we're also really aware of the Winchester movement strategy, which I believe one of the public speakers mentioned previously. We have also been working very closely with the outputs and what's coming back from the vision for Winchester. And we are also keenly aware that one of the top priorities for the council and cabinet is climate change. And we did have a climate emergency declaration. So again, not only are we complying and meeting all the aspirations of the SPD with Central Winchester, but we are conscious that all those other studies and the climate change emergency is also very, very key for us to achieve. The site does present challenges. We all know that there's a history to Central Winchester site, and we do want to get it right this time. But some of the challenges, and you can see on the challenges slide, it's getting the balance of mix of uses right, it's getting the feel right, it's getting the public space versus private space right. So it does create challenges, and not only from what people from Winchester and the local businesses want, but really importantly, what the market wants and how viable a scheme is going to be. There's no point coming to the public with a fantastic scheme that is just not deliverable because it isn't viable. So we've had to balance all of those different elements and many more. And what we've got is a balance of uses across the site that will evolve the vision that we've got so that the site becomes a catalyst for change. It will be resilient against whatever the future may throw at us. None of us expected COVID, but again, we've got to factor changes like that in. We've seen flooding in recent times. How do we make the town and the city resilient against that? We need it above all, again, to be transformative, to be vibrant, and to create that sense of community. And if we can deliver a scheme that pulls all those together, we will then achieve the objectives of not only the SPD, but all the other studies and all the other top priorities that go along with us on this journey with Central Winchester. So the mix of uses is, as Councillor Lerny said, very much in line with the SPD. For those of you that know that document well, the eastern side of the site where we've got our residential element is very much the quieter residential site. We're looking to provide a mix of different residential offers, again, appealing to the younger people and the families. And then moving across to the western side of the site where you can see there King's Walk and the mixed use hub. We will there be looking to deliver our vibrant sort of commercial side and food and beverage, recognising the importance of the Broadway and how that is developed to be an integral part of the Central Winchester scheme, linking through the scheme to the rest of the city. And also on the other side of the development, again, we heard a little bit earlier about transforming Friarsgate and how that sits with the wider movement strategy. Well, we are very aware of that as well, and we have been talking to our colleagues at Hampshire throughout the process. Maintaining links to the universities, feeding through that creative and younger generation, and providing a sort of a hub for them as they move out of university and into work. So that's our proposal for the mix of uses across the site. The next slide will show how the quantum of uses within the development proposals sit within the quantum of uses that the SPD allows for. So these figures here are square meters. So you can see on the left-hand side of the chart there, the retail element, as Councillor Lerny says, slightly below the lower quantum allowed in the SPD or suggested in the SPD. You can see that the residential element is well in line with the middle of the quantum of uses in the SPD. But again, as Councillor, mixed uses element, which contains and includes the commercial side, is at the upper end, and there may be some transfer between retail and commercial there. It might be that makers and artists want to use some of their studio space as retail. So overall, we are comfortable that we are in line with the SPD quantums, and you can see the far right chart there, the far right bars show that we propose, or the development proposals sit at about 32,000 square metres, well within the range set out in the SPD. So very much guided by that. Not as dense as the SPD, but it does give us the chance to have some exceptional public realm that will knit the site together whilst providing the balance and the mix of uses. So what we want to do then in the presentation is talk through the indicative phasing of how the scheme might come forward, and we about bringing forward King's Walk and about getting some activity and some footfall going there. So we're looking at that. We also are looking at whether we can demolish Briarsgate Medical Centre. We are liaising with the planning authority at the moment because, as everyone knows, Central Winchester sits within a conservation area. So we are working to see what we can do there. And we have already made moves to bring the market into the Broadway on a Sunday. So we will be looking at, are there any improvements we could do to enhance that experience? We've already got Quickbury House let on a short-term letting to low property guardians. So we are starting to get some activity in the short term, which will then morph through into the latter phases. The next phase we would be looking at is to bring forward residential on the eastern side of the site, together with looking at how we resolve the issues of the buses. We've currently got the bus station sitting right in the middle of our site, and we're not going to be able to develop anything there until the buses have got an alternative location. Intense talks have been going on with Hampshire and the bus operator, and we have agreed short to medium term solution will be that the buses will move on street. And you can see on the image that we've got here, the green line that runs along Friarsgate, down Tanner Street and up Silver Hill. That is the proposed bus route. Really important to keep the passengers and keep the footfall coming into the centre of town, but also it allows flexibility for that to evolve over time as Central Winchester develops into a vibrant zone itself, and also to respond to the outcomes of the Winchester movement strategy. So it's not the end game. It is an interim solution for the short to medium term, which will allow us to deliver development on Central Winchester, and also allows for movement and accessibility to be continued through the site into the heart of the city whilst the changes happen over time. We can revisit that in the longer term to see whether the vision in the SPD of a bus hub on Middlebrook Street car park is the right solution as our city centre changes and responds to current situations and current conditions. So the next phase, phase 3 of the scheme, will be looking longer term again. You can see there on the right hand side of that image that we have opened up and delivered the Riverside Walk, which again was key to what people wanted to see and is highlighted in the SPD. We also there, you can see we've got Wallstaplers Hall very much still in play, not straight away obviously, but towards the sort of one of the later phases of the scheme. We do want to provide a cultural centre, albeit that we're not sure what that is. We're currently talking and have been talking to Hampshire Cultural Trust around what their image and what their vision is for the cultural and heritage offer within the city centre, and we will continue to do that. And Wallstaplers Hall is still continued and earmarked for that base for the cultural and heritage offer for the site. We are also then going to be looking at the longer term solution for Quickbury House, and also then the longer term use of the top corner of the middle of the King's Walk site, which is currently earmarked for a hotel, which again will then help to bolster our overnight tourists and our overnight visitor capacity. So that will be looking at one of the later phases. The final phasing, or once we've got all of those phases delivered, you can see that the scheme will have a balance of uses across the site. We will maintain those links to the university, and then as the Winchester movement strategy and the central Winchester site develops, we can then look at Middlebrook Street to understand what Middlebrook Street car park then becomes. In the next slide, I think we've got that showing future development for Middlebrook Street. So that will be the completed phasing of the scheme. It's not going to happen overnight. It will happen in phases, incrementally, as set out in the SPD, over a number of years. But there are also elements of that scheme in there that we can get on and make a start with. So what we would then want to do throughout the presentation is to look at some of the images that we want to capture in central Winchester. So the housing for all and the live element, we're looking at a slightly different offer. We want to appeal to the younger generation. So it's co-living, it might be built to rent, pocket living, there'll be affordable housing, and also we want to provide for younger families to keep and attract them to live in the city centre. The work element of the scheme, again, it's not the grade A office space that we will see elsewhere in the city. We'll be looking at flexible workspace, which I think we can have a little look at on the next slide. There'll be elements of desk space, there'll be individual incubator spaces, and people want that much more relaxed environment now for work. It's not a 9-to-5 sort of work day anymore. We're all experiencing working from home. We're all working in a very different way, and we want to build on that and include elements of that within the Central Winchester scheme. The other element of the live and work and to attract the youngsters is play. So we also need to provide spaces for people to relax, enjoy and play in the city centre. Again, with the current COVID situation, what those look like may be slightly different now. We will need to concentrate on outside space. And again, the spaces across the Central Winchester scheme are not uniform. We've got smaller, intimate spaces. We've got alleyways, small squares. We've also got the potential, for example, in the Broadway and in other open space that is allowed for in the site to have a much bigger, wider expanse of open space. And we want to bring in art and creativity and get people to really interact with the space. So we're starting to think about what that might look like. Movement across the site is really important. Obviously, the premise across Winchester city centre is to reduce the vehicular traffic through, and we will be looking to incorporate ways and means of doing that in the long term. Obviously, it will take time to introduce the reduction in vehicles into the city centre. We're not going to do that without providing for alternatives, so that will feed through over time. But all the different elements that we will be thinking about, we're already starting to do that. We're doing some bus work. We're looking already at doing some work on how we get the buses out of the bus station into a transformed Friarsgate, Tanner Street and Silver Hill. We're not just going to be putting bus stops up in the existing places, in the existing sort of streetscape. We will be transforming that area so that bus passengers not only get a really fantastic experience as they come through and get on and off the buses, but pedestrians and cyclists also are able to enjoy and share the space safely. There'll be tactile paving, there'll be different sorts of bus shelters, there'll be opening up and transforming through the public realm of that whole area. So you will see that transform over time. And I'm pretty sure that looking at the bus station we have now, opposed to what we really want to provide on street, our bus passengers and bus operators won't be too upset that the provision will be different. That leads us on to the wider public realm. We've done some public realm guidance work with groups of stakeholders, so we're starting to finalise what that public realm guidance document will be. Again, referring to the different types of spaces, greening of the area, making it an attractive place to be, not only in the nice summer months, but also in the winter months when it's not quite so inclement out there, and going through into the evenings. So we're really understanding that not only the public realm on the site needs to be exceptional, but that needs to link through to the wider city. We've mentioned the Broadway. It is a key area for us to develop over time. And also it's how people can access and move through the whole site and really take advantage of the exceptional public realm. Key to that will be the waterways. We've already mentioned that we'll be delivering Riverside Walk as in the SPD. We've also recently experienced flooding in Winchester. We know that we've got a high water table. So how can we incorporate ways to deal with water in the central Winchester site through rain gardens, through drainage channels? Obviously opening up the waterway is key. So elements of that will be brought through into the public realm design as well. Sustainability is another key feature. We haven't put areas on a plan because sustainability will run across the whole site. We want to minimise the impact of this development on the environment, and we are fully aware of the emergency declaration that we as a council want to achieve by 2030. So we will be working to reuse existing buildings where possible to minimise the carbon impact. We'll be looking to reuse materials where possible and bring in innovation across the scheme to minimise the impact on the environment. So we've got some great ideas about what we want to include in the site, and we've got ideas on how we want to deliver the site in phases. But I think it's already been mentioned on the call, there's a lot to consider. We as a council, we haven't necessarily got it right in the past. Councillor Learney's acknowledged that we've learnt from that. We do recognise that. But there are some really key considerations that we need to consider as a council, all around these 5 elements here: the cost of bringing forward the scheme, the speed at which the scheme comes forward and the phasing that the scheme comes forward. Risk is another thing. We really have to be aware of the risks of delivering a challenging site like Central Winchester. What elements of control should we have as a council to make sure that our aspirations and the aspirations of all those that contributed not only to the SPD but to the open fora that we've had, we need to make sure that those are delivered. And actually we have to recognise that that takes a lot of expertise and a lot of resource. So what is the best way for us as a council to secure that expertise? It's not necessarily in-house. We will need additional support and additional skills and expertise to bring forward Central Winchester. So we've been looking at options for delivery. I'm not going to go through them in great detail. There are other slides that follow this one, which goes into each of these options in more detail, and those will be gone through in presentations, and they will be available for people to look at in our exhibition room via our website from tomorrow onwards. But the 3 main areas that we looked at, which were suitable for Central Winchester, were entering into an agreement with a development partner through a contractual joint venture. So that's the development agreement approach, where we find a suitable developer that share our ambitions and share our aims for Central Winchester. We agree the way that Central Winchester will be developed, and we enter into an agreement with that developer. So that will enable us to share the cost, to share the risk, and to really make use of expertise that is out there. There are developers out there now. Times have changed an awful lot. Developers want to be in it for the long haul. They share and recognise the value of the social and economic benefits that regeneration can have. They're not all in it to make a fast buck and get out. So we would be looking to find a like-minded developer should we go down that route. Speed and control, there will be a little bit of juggling with speed and control, and that will all get sorted out through negotiations through the development agreement. So you can see that a DA is actually quite a reasonable approach for delivering. We could still talk around the incremental delivery and how that would come in phases, and we could specify the look and the feel. So I think that would be a good use of, or a good way to deliver. The other option that we've looked at is us as Winchester City Council acting as a master developer, where we bring forward the individual parcels, where we drive the development and we take on the role of master developer. You can see from the red, amber, green that it's almost totally the opposite of having a development partner on board. The risk, the cost and the expertise is totally down to Winchester City Council to bear. But actually we may be able to deliver certain elements of it a little bit quicker, and we will have potentially more control over the site. But is that worth the risk, the cost and the amount of resource required to bring forward Central Winchester? We're weighing that up. We've had a look at that. And the other option we've looked at is it's similar to a joint venture for Central Winchester, but a development partner across our portfolio of sites. So we would be looking to enter into an agreement to deliver not only Central Winchester, but Station Approach, potentially River Park, and other development parcels across the site, across the city. I think that has its challenges. We're not convinced that that is the right way to go, because do we want to put all of our eggs in one basket? So you can see from the red, amber, green diagram that the emerging delivery option and the emerging preferred delivery approach is to enter into a contractual joint venture with a development partner. So that's the emerging theme, that's the emerging thoughts. As I say, the following slides just go through the pros and the cons of each of those different approaches for those that want more information. I won't go through them now because, again, it's been quite a long presentation already. So, Councillor Lerney, I will hand back to you, and do ask if there's anything else that you would like to know.
Thank you, Varian. I'd like to cover the consultation that we're planning before we move on to some of the questions that have been asked. We are very keen to talk to the public and receive assurance that they're content with the direction of travel on what is a key site in our city. And while we can't hold any physical events, and in the current lockdown situation, it's actually fortunate that we planned this as principally a virtual process, there are still lots of ways to get involved. Tomorrow we launch our online virtual exhibition, which will be laid out in the style of a traditional public exhibition, with panels explaining each part of the scheme with plans and images. We're going to be holding 4 public online consultation sessions on the 16th of November, 24th of November, 30th of November and the 3rd of December. These are being held at different times of the day to allow even more people to take part. We have a feedback questionnaire which will remain open until the 12th of January 2021. And all of the links to the exhibition, to register to attend a consultation event or to fill in the questionnaire can be done through our website. So winchester.gov.uk/CWR, and that will be available from tomorrow. If you're not able to access the internet, the Council Customer Services team will post the information and a feedback form to people's houses. We're also going to be putting out posters to encourage participation, initially in the Broadway. We're also talking to various other people who will help us promote the consultation further. I think it's important as well to go back to what we're being asked to approve today. As the presentation showed, the first phase covers King's Walk, Friars Gate and the public realm on Middlebrook Street and Silver Hill. And we are looking to bring forward early, albeit temporary, intervention in those areas, creating more exciting public spaces, new employment opportunities, and giving a statement of intent as to the direction of travel. In particular, a clear statement that we are getting on with it. If we wait until all the issues throughout the town around movement, the use of other sites and the general situation are answered, it will be years before we do anything and the area will continue to crumble and the high streets suffer. We have had Mr. Gould's comments in which unfortunately he couldn't make live, and he was asking questions around what is happening with the bus hub and Friarsgate car park, as well as asking about bringing on board a really good developer who will bring a master planner to bear on the site. So we'll take those up. At this point, I'd like to bring in some others in the meeting to respond to the questions we've had for the public. So, Chaz, have we got you on the line?
Before Chaz comes on the line, I just want to remind Cabinet that we also have 5 councillors who'd like to speak.
Yep.
So
would you like to take those first, Leader?
I think so, and then and then we can have questions all at once. So
that's fine.
Okay, thank you. The first up is Councillor Hutchison. Are you there?
Yes,
I am
I'm here.
Thank you.
Thank you very
okay.
much. Thank you very much indeed for giving me the opportunity to ask a few questions. And thank you also for an excellent presentation. I'd also like to reiterate the fact that I'm, as I'm sure everybody knows, really keen to see this development progress and to progress well. I've been involved since the outset when we set the brief and appointed JTP to do the SPD, and have been very keen that we should move it along as well as possible. And I very much appreciated the comments from Paul Spencer and Wendy Wyatt, really that we do need to see action, and that we've got a proposal which looks very interesting. I suppose my real concern is that while the paper covers a great deal, with the exception of the proposals for the King's Walk, everything is very vague still. The paper has 3 separate recommendations, but they're not clearly connected. And because it's all very vague, I have to confess, for me, it raises lots of questions which hopefully we can answer and then feel better. But to start with, as I understand it, the real focus is on getting a development partner, and that without a development partner, we're not really going to be moving forward. But I wondered if it was possible to give more detail of what actually the partnership would be. I appreciate that you've identified 3 different options, but they are very little detail. I think the one with going for a development partner makes certainly a degree of sense, although I think that it could, I'd like to see in consideration of setting up a partnership board. But that apart, it would be useful to understand what exactly the checks and balances of such a partnership would be, and who would be doing what would be the council's responsibility and what would be the developer's responsibility. The WCC has purchased a lot of land and buildings. Will they remain in the council ownership, or will they be sold to the developer? As a first step, will the developer be required to prepare a framework plan, a master plan for the area, including the public realm? Not a rigid plan that sets out, but one that sets out the development and the direction of travel, identifying different parcels of work to be carried out at different times, phases and timescales, and a methodology for engagement and implementation. Will the SPD be the basis for that brief? And will it be clear that there will be a plan for short-term interventions? And how will the council, town forum and stakeholders be involved? These are all questions that I think are important while being clear of what the route is. The SPD was clear that the area should be developed on a phase basis, not all at once on a cleared site, that the work should be carried out piece by piece, but not necessarily by the same developer. More importantly, that it should not be piecemeal. To achieve this, parcels of land to be developed need to be identified and design guidance will be required. Will this be prepared by the developer, and what checks will the council require? Will the master developer work with other developers? There was also a commitment to having a number of architects designing different parts of the whole. How will this approach be guaranteed by the partner developer? How will the master planner be selected, and how will architects be selected to carry out individual sections of the work? What will WCC's role be in this, and what outside design guidance and design advice will be engaged this was something that was a really important factor when appointing people to do work on Silver Hill. The paper identifies rough areas to be developed and how this might be phased, but it doesn't give timeframes. The details and more exact timings will, I assume, be part of the framework master planning process. Is that correct? The SPD in this paper refer to exceptional public realm, and I'm pleased to note that although the text doesn't highlight the Broadway, which is of course a stunning piece of public realm and absolutely fundamental to the regeneration of the area, it is identified within phase 1. Having a Sunday market and the markets there at the moment highlight its potential, but more low-cost short-term improvements could be carried out to make it an attractive public space in the short term, which is much more people orientated, while also still used potentially by a few buses. And while the longer term plans are being developed, is this being considered at the moment? I appreciate that things move on, and in this case, the movement strategy and the future of the buses, but wonder why all or part of Middlebrook Street car park appears to have been omitted or left until late in the process. It offers immediate opportunities, especially now there are plans for a park and ride, and these are all progressing. The paper refers to the emerging delivery strategy to enter into a development agreement with a developer. Is a development partner being sought at the present time? And when will more details be available?
Chair, that is the 5 minutes up.
Oh, so can I just very, very quickly, on King's Walk and Priorgate, I welcome that, but I want to know how that fits in with the overall plan. Is this a piecemeal bit, or will it fit in? Because I know it's a 10-year plan. And also, I'm not at all clear what the consultation is aiming for. Is it to inform, or is it to try to get ideas, and how will they be handled? Sorry, a lot of questions. I'm very sorry, but those are my concerns.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hutchison. As you may have noticed, we're having a few technical problems here, and we aren't able to show the timer, or indeed me as chair in the room. So I think we ought to just take could we take a few minutes break? Because we're going to have to reboot the system from the St Giles room. So Cabinet members, apologies for this, but I think that's probably the best way forward, rather than having an out-of-date screen for everyone to see. So apologies for that. We'll just take a 5-minute break. Thank you. Am I on mute?
Yes, you're unmuted.
Hello, and welcome back, everybody. Do apologise for that that brief moment there. We were having quite a lot of technical problems, but anyway, we're back now. And I still have a number of councillors who wish to speak on this item. And the next one up is Councillor Mather.
Right. Whoops. Right, very good. Thank you, Chairman. I've read the paper with interest and the reports with interest and listened with interest to Verian's presentation. I have to say that this cabinet meeting is becoming a bit like an analogy of the Silver Hill Central Winchester restoration story. It's kind of going on and going back to the beginning and all that sort of thing. But I promise not to take up too much of your time and to be concise. I very much concur with Paul Spencer of the bid. I think there is a problem with the length of the consultation period and going back again to the beginning with more consultation. I think that this must be the most consulted project ever. This administration came in criticising the previous administration for not listening enough, in spite of the fact that the previous administration carried out an excellent and exhaustive consultation to come up with the SPD. And consultation obviously has an important place, and at various stages of the project we must consult. But the reaction of residents in my ward when they're told we're entering another consultation phase is just disbelief. Please get on, get something done. And the age of those who are now saying that they don't think Central Winchester restoration will happen in my lifetime is going down. There is a lot of cynicism. And we've got to get on with the project. That is, so we have one of the recommendations is regarding consultation. Another recommendation is to do with the Friarsgate surgery, and on that I think we're all agreed that's an easy one. Yes, pull it down and get on. Regarding King's Walk, I read the Turner Works glossy brochure. It's very impressive, and it's full of very nice ideas: outdoor event space, studios, creative spaces. One's transported to another world. Turner Works concludes that the demand from people who could pay the rent for such creative space is there in numbers that could lead them further to conclude that their whole scheme is a robust business model. I seriously question this. Winchester is quite a small city, and despite the I don't know, 5,000 or so creatives that that Turner Works has found that we have, I think small-scale creative industries often operate on a knife edge. There's somehow built in there an assumption that young people and students would create demand for such space. As I say, these are all very lovely ideas. I just question the hard-headed sort of business side of it. Hobby businesses are sort of full of enthusiasm, and it's great. And there are the hobby businesses is at the bottom of the scale. Then you have creative and digital, etc. But as a trainee accountant, I was I can well remember that being told that this sector of the economy is very high risk, and to build a robust long-term business model, I think is rather questionable. I note when I turn to the financial pages of the Turner report, it typically a local authority puts in 200 to 400,000 seed funding. Well, that seems like a lot of money to me, especially at this time. And I see that with 100% occupancy, there would be a 10-year payback. Well, that 100% occupancy, the figures do not include any cost of money at all. It assumes that you're not having to pay any interest on the money you've borrowed. As soon as you...
Councillor Mather, could I ask you to draw your comments to a close, because you have actually used up your 5 minutes?
Have I really used up my 5 minutes?
You have.
Okay.
I know it goes really
It
quickly.
goes incredibly quickly. I say these very nice ideas. I worry about the robustness of the business model. To work with a development partner, yes, a sensible thing to do. I take Kim's point of multiple developers. And the problem is that we don't have a good track record with development partners. So I hope we manage to negotiate good contract terms in spite of this, and also to build up a constructive working relationship with a development partner, which has proved to be a bit of a challenge in the past. So
I'm
with these
gonna
reservations, and thank you for my 5.5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mather. I now call on Councillor Horrell.
Chairman, good morning, and thank you for allowing me to speak this morning at the meeting, and thank you very much for the presentation today. Just for the record, I'd like to make a point that it was said earlier, the SPD was adopted in 2019. In fact, it was not. It was adopted in June 2018, just so that everyone is aware of that. As one of the key drivers for the SPD and the Central Winchester Regeneration in the last few years, I'm really pleased we're moving forward with CAB 3271 today. I want to put on record the fact that the JTP project and the SPD development did an outstanding job on consultation. Some 3,000 individuals and organisations participated and gave us their views, and the development of the document that we have now embedded in our policies is what those individuals wanted and actually believed in. I therefore encourage you to stick as closely as possible to the shape of that document. The bus hub is a good example, hotly contested a few years ago, but the overwhelming view was we want a hub, somewhere we can wait for the bus in the warm with facilities. The current view is that that aspiration, certainly in the short to medium term, is not possible. And I say to you, we really need to challenge ourselves and ask why not. Consultation on new aspects of the development are important and welcomed, but please don't reinvent the wheel yet again on the aspects we are all very happy with. Rally behind the majority that we're all aligned with. So it would be really helpful today to fully understand the exact details of the consultation issues for the period November to January. Some other speakers have already alluded to this morning. What is it that you want us to specifically agree on as a part of that process? I would also encourage you to ensure this is a district consultation. In the prior process for the SPD, we made significant efforts to talk to residents and organisations across the district. This might be Central Winchester, but it is a Winchester district project. The SPD was also developed alongside a viability assessment. I am therefore slightly concerned to read that some of our aspirations may be ruled out on viability grounds. I know COVID has given a different view of the world, but I do not accept that the broad aspirations that we had are not achievable. You see that in the ranges we included in the SPD for development. I encourage you too to approach the development bit by bit, because we know that this is a supported and safe approach. A master development agreement and other specialist developers working in collaboration is a model we explored based on the Oxford Council experience, and one I would ask you to consider seriously, as we have good knowledge of how this might work effectively for us here in Winchester. But Chairman, I am pleased to be party to this project moving forward, and I thank all of those who prepared some excellent work this morning for consideration. Thank you for my time.
Thank you very much, Councillor Horrell. I now call on Councillor Brooke.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for allowing me to speak this morning, and I'm pleased that this paper was brought forward today to show there's finally some progress on the Central Winchester Regeneration Project. It's great to see that there's a vibrant mix of pictures in this paper and within the presentation, showing a clear indication of the vibrancy of the Regeneration Project going forwards. I was particularly interested in the proposals for King's Walk, which starts at paragraph 12 on page 21. They very much mirror the proposals we'd previously put forward for the meanwhile uses within the bus station that this administration had rejected. This was a project I was extremely passionate about, and this sort of vibrant mixed-use hub is exactly what Winchester is missing currently. The vision for the meanwhile use was that it could then be moved lock stock to elsewhere in the city as the regeneration continued. This administration took the short-sighted view and looked at the costs in isolation rather than the future of that space and those businesses. And the businesses that this project is aimed at would have been in situ over a year ago. Now spending much needed money to repeat much of the work that had already been completed behind the Meanwhile Uses project. Turner Works and Worthwhile Works have done an excellent job. I wonder, however, where the costings of the previous advisory groups are in the figures that have been brought before us in this paper, as they've been obviously omitted. I do feel strongly that a creative hub for Central Winchester and start-up businesses is essential for our residents. I completely agree with Wendy White's statement earlier regarding this. I'm pleased that Verian and her team are still heading up this project. They're extremely capable, adaptable, and have some really exciting visions for Winchester moving forwards. I'd like to thank them for all of their hard work bringing this before us today. When this project was run under the Conservative administration, it was done via a cross-party advisory group alongside members of the public, including Mr Gold, who wanted to speak this morning, the bid, and additional stakeholders. So the questions from those parties would already have been addressed as they were part of the process of getting us here. Councillor Hutchison also had many questions and suggestions this morning. Councillor Hutchison was also very much part of the process under the Conservative administration in the cross-party working. This project has once again been done in isolation without cross-party and other involvement, and this paper feels, to me, this paper feels that the consultations are only allowable once this administration have made their decisions behind closed doors. Whilst this recommendation instructs the project team to take the King's Walk to the next stage of decision making, I would ask this administration to stop alienating the majority of this council's members from their decision making, so to stop operating in this closed way and follow up on their promise of being open and transparent, and to consider cross-party and additional member collaboration going forwards. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brooke. Councillor Lumby.
Thank you, Leader. Back to my traditional failing to find my notes on my page. Thank you. Right. Thank you, Leader, and thank you for the opportunity to address Cabinet today. Thank you also for the informative presentation and for the various contributions which we've heard as well, including the comments made by Paul Spencer from the bid. As a first point, can I please have a clarity on the timetable going forward, including what approvals will be needed before we get to any disposal or entering into any development or partnership arrangements? For example, will this come back to full council for approval? Given its importance, I hope that that will be the case. Secondly, and as a related point, please can I talk a little bit about the proposed delivery strategy? We've heard lots of other people talking about the actual development itself, but I think it's also worth giving a bit of focus to how we're going to do the development. Councillor Hutchinson has raised lots of good questions, as Councillor Brooke just mentioned, and it does emphasise this is an important area which needs detailed discussion. And actually, it would be really good if Councillor Hutchinson could circulate those questions she asked. I thought there was some really good stuff in there. Councillor Horrell also mentioned the Oxford model. So there are lots of discussion to be had as to how we do the delivery. I've got a bit of experience here from my background as a development lawyer, and of course we as a council have much experience of that. Indeed, I think I'm right in saying that it was under the last Lib Dem administration and under Councillor Lerney's leadership that the council went ahead with the single developer approach with the appointment of Thornfield, later Henderson. So I note Councillor Lerney's consistency in approach, but we should be very careful before going to that place again. Alternatives should be given full and proper consideration. And in doing so, we need to think about issues such as financing, tax, risk, reward, and of course control. And we need to make sure we get back all the money we've invested to date and more. And as Councillor Brooke mentioned, lots of the costs to date aren't in any way referred to in this report. We seem to have been limited to only 3 options for delivery, which I was rather surprised by. And I think there are other options and routes we should be properly considering. Councillor Hutchinson, for example, mentioned the Development Corporation, which may be a good way to depoliticise and embed the regeneration, although there may be other issues with it. For various reasons, personally, I do think that development in sections, however we go, with separate developers may be better, allowing us to benefit from the rising market we will be creating through the phased redevelopment of the area. This isn't quite the same thing as the master developer opportunity referred to in the report, and I don't think it's been properly considered here. The reason for not going for the master developer approach itself is analysed further in section 16, especially at 16.12, and the Cabinet will see 3 specific reasons why that route shouldn't be followed. It firstly refers to the complexity involving intensive expertise and resource, but both of these can be obtained equally for a section by section, developer by developer approach, particularly if we employ a good master planner to build on the SBD. Secondly, it refers to the council wishing to share risk with a partner, but that is the same whether we have one developer or we have a number of developers, and as Verena mentioned, we don't want to put all our eggs in one basket. We know the danger of this from the last time around. Actually, let's apply that same logic and take this forward in separate stages. Finally, the paper argues that funding is better secured via a development partner, but this is equally true whether there is one or more developers we're working with, and indeed, as I say, we avoid the issue of one of those falling over. So I think the reasons for not taking that approach aren't really properly considered, and I think have real worries about repeating the mistakes of the past. Now we talk about some of the ways at 11:35 to get around that, but actually this is very high level. It really does fall into the warm words trap without really giving any of the details. What happens if a developer turns around and says we can no longer proceed with your scheme? Do we have remedies? Do we have termination, buyback, council subsidy? All sorts of different routes and opportunities, and we need to know what we're going to do about that one, particularly if we do put all our eggs in one basket. I do note this might be reconsidered as the project progresses, which is all good. Can I ask at what stage will this be considered? We need a proper discussion on this, and we must avoid being presented with a fait accompli. We don't want to be in a position, as Councillor Brooke decided, where the administration decides what it's going to do, and we have a little dance around, and that's what's happened anyway. We should have a meaningful.
Could I ask you to bring your remarks to a close, please, because you've eaten up 5 minutes.
God,
and some.
Check the clock, please. I think something's going on funny with. I'll be very quick. I'll leave out my section on King's Walk. So to wrap it up, can I ask that the strategy is indeed kept under review and that a proper discussion with members and others takes place on this in early course? And I think King's Walk is a bit ugly. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. Cabinet, that concludes the list of councillors wishing to speak. So I think back over to you, Councillor Lerney, or possibly Chaz. I'll be guided by you, Councillor Lerney.
Thank you. I'll make a few points before passing on to Mr. Bradfield. As I've already said, if we wait until all uncertainties are resolved, we will make no decisions, and this will carry on for many years to come. In that light, I would say that working with multiple developers will add time, complexity, and make it much harder to achieve that exceptional public realm, which is so important to our residents. Master planning has been mentioned on a number of occasions, and while that can be done with multiple developers, again, that will extend the time that is taken to do all this. We know viability considerations can change dramatically in light of economic considerations. Ask any London office developer today compared to a year ago, and that's a risk that we'll have to factor in and deal with as we go forward in the process. What we have learnt from the past is that a lack of public support is a key risk in this project. We are clear there's a lot of work to do in preparing to bring an appropriate partner on board, and as the timeline that we've shown indicates. We also have to work out how King's Walk might fit in to, a future development process. But it's really important to us as an administration to get that public reaction as to whether we're running along the right lines in terms of the layout and phasing. If we're barking up the wrong tree, we need to know now, not when we've wasted time and resources. The length of consultation has been mentioned. With Christmas coming, we were really keen not to close the consultation early. And I'm also pleased to say that the virtual consultation has made it much easier for us to reach the entire district rather than a Guildhall based process. So actually I'm very happy with the way the consultation's shaping up, and I'll ask Verian to say a bit more about that later. With regard to King's Walk, Turner Works are an operator of similar sites with expertise in the area, and also brought on a local partner to give them a really good understanding of the market in the local area, and that's why we chose them to do the feasibility studies, and we are confident in the work that they've done. I think this is probably an appropriate point to bring in Chaz Bradfield. And if you could cover the movement strategy, master planning and the approval process going forward, Chaz, and I'd appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor Lerney, and for those of you who don't know me, Chaz Bradfield, Strategic Director of Place. I think firstly, just to thank everyone who's taken the time out to speak on this today. I've got about 10 pages of notes, so I don't think that we'll be able to necessarily respond directly to everything that's been said now, but I think that actually makes the points that a number of people have asked about it in terms of what is it the council is looking for from this consultation. And I think for me, this is a great start, because exactly the sort of feedback that you're giving us is exactly what we're after for this consultation. This is very much taking things a step at a time. I appreciate the frustration that some may feel about time taken to get on with things. I share them as well, but complex mixed use city centre development does take time, and to be honest, does take sometimes some schemes to fail before the right scheme comes along. And we firmly believe we're moving in the direction of the right scheme here. I think the other thing is that's really important to us and the team is that we move this forward together as a place. We've heard a number of speakers say that actually that's the strong feedback coming forward from those who are involved in the vision consultation is we want action, but also I think others refer back to the work done on the SPD. That gives us a really strong foundation for the scheme, and that's really important. In terms of consultation, I understand people's comment around, oh no, not another consultation. The reality is consultation is a really important part of this process. One, for, as Councillor Lerny has said, for us to understand views and enable people to be involved and come along with us on this journey. But also there's legal responsibilities on the council to consult at appropriate times before key decisions are taken, and this is one of those times. In terms of that decision-making process, we'll be aiming to report back to Cabinet in February next year on the outcomes of this consultation, and that you'll see, and there's been quite a lot of comment about it, that the delivery strategy is one of those emerging directions of travel, and I think I wouldn't put it any stronger than that at the moment. There's been a lot of really helpful comment and critique around that this morning, and that's something that we're very actively working on right now. So views on that, and particularly some that were put forward by a number of speakers, are really helpful to help us then advise Cabinet on the best delivery approach. But the February decision on that will be a direction of travel. There will then be much more work to be done over the 6 months following that in terms of exactly what and how and what is it we want to specify should we go down the route of a development agreement or any other delivery route. So I suppose I'm just reassuring people that I think one of the questions is, are we seeking a development partner at the moment? No, we're not. This is an emerging approach, and we very much welcome people's views and challenges on that, because that'll help Cabinet form their firm view of the right direction for us to take on this project. Just roving around a few of the other points that that I noted down. I think the financial viability is something that has been mentioned. It is something that for us is really, really important in this type of scheme. It is dynamic. The COVID situation, I think this time last year, none of us would have foreseen, but that won't last forever. Other things will come along to change. So it's really important that we do have a dynamic approach to assessing viability in this type of schemes. And comment on the King's Walk and the business model there. Remember, one of the things that I think the council has had some success over is attracting funding from EM3 LEP, the Local Enterprise Partnership. What we're finding is that schemes need to be really well worked up and precise, and be able to make a good case to enable them to attract external funding. And we will be making some funding bids to EM3 for the Central Winchester scheme at the right time. It's really important that we have these schemes as defined as we can, because what tends to happen at the moment with central government funding that comes through the LEP is it comes on a short fuse, and if you haven't got an oven-ready scheme, you're unlikely to attract the funding. A good example of that at the moment was the movement strategy work around the Voltex multi-storey park and ride, where we did have a scheme that was ready. We were able to make a quick funding application and received over 5 million funding for the city. I think the COVID process has challenged the way that we do our consultation, but I think it will mean that we'll take some learning from that, and we would really welcome people's feedback on the process of consultation here, because this is different. And actually, as Councillor Lerny said, I think it gives us the opportunity of more easily reaching a wider audience too. I think that's probably really all I'd like to say in terms of the detailed views that have been put forward. I hope I've covered the points, Councillor Lerner, you asked me to cover there, and probably just pass on to Varian Lyons to talk about that consultation element that I think Councillor Lerner wanted her to talk about.
I think if you could cover the movement strategy, Chair, and where we are on that.
Thank you. So I appreciate how that may look sometimes externally, but it really feels to me like we work as one team with the County Council colleagues. So within the movement strategy work, there's a number of studies being undertaken at the moment that are coming to fruition now. Varian and team work very closely with another head of programme that works for me called Andy Hickman, who is the City Council's lead on movement strategy. Councillor Todd and I and Andy sit on the movement strategy board with County Council colleagues. So this is really very much joined up work, and particularly I think we have to view the movement strategy as a good vision for where we all want Winchester to get to, and we then need to take the opportunities to bite it off piece by piece. So Park and Ride is clearly a key part of that. For Central Winchester, the knotty challenge that the team have had is how can we help a development come forward whilst not having a final idea of exactly how the movement strategy will work out with some of the key routes in the city, and also key motorway junctions, and works around them will have an impact on the way that the traffic circulation works around the city. So again, that I think we will find is incremental delivery over time. But for this particular piece of work in Central Winchester, accessibility, particularly pedestrian permeability, and how cycles integrate into the development, as well as how we can get a bus solution that works for everybody. And there's a lot of stakeholders in buses. There's clearly the passengers who are the biggest stakeholder, but there's also bus companies and the County Council. That's been a large piece of work, and really happy, or the team very happy to talk any members through that in some detail if you want to get a real appreciation of where we've got to on that. So I hope that just gives that overview and reassurance on movement strategy at the moment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bradfield. Members of Cabinet, have you any questions to ask at the moment? No. Could we therefore move to debate? Any debate? Councillor Lerner, you flashed up on my screen then. Councillor Lerner.
Well, it's just that we haven't actually covered the choosing appropriate delivery partners and viability questions that were raised earlier. So I was wondering if we could ask Katie Kopek from JLL, who's also on this call, to respond to some of those issues.
Okay, yes, I didn't realise she was on the call. Okay, Katie, are you there?
I think Katie's had to drop off. I don't know whether Chaz, whether we want to come back on those. I think Katie had to go, unfortunately. We could certainly come back on those in due course, Councillor Lerner.
Yeah, yes, I think we need to come back to that. I mean, it is something that we've thought about and talked about, but I think it's useful to have that expert external knowledge coming into it.
That's fine. I'll make a note and we can come back on that. That's no problem.
Okay. I believe Councillor Todd had his hand up. Am I right in saying that too? Yeah. Yeah, Councillor Todd and then Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you for the chance to make a few comments on this. I'm not going to go into the details because I think they've been very well covered, both by the deputations that have been made and by the answers that have been given. I would reinforce Mr. Bradfield's point that not only have officers worked closely together on the question of movement and how it relates to Central Winchester, but also Cabinet members. And I've certainly worked very closely with Councillor Lerney to make sure that that we have a scheme that works in terms of future movement as well as for the future redevelopment of the centre. I think we've received a lot of really useful input and ideas from people today, which slightly belies the point that people are saying that we shouldn't be consulting and listening on the stage of the development proposals. And I think it is useful as we narrow in, inevitably start to take a particular view on how the SPD needs to be implemented, that we take people with us and give them a chance to comment on that and have their views heard. But I'd also like to sort of acknowledge that I think the recommendations are in the right place. You know, it was talked about earlier as if we're presenting a fait accompli, and that's absolutely not what this paper does. It makes it very clear that we're looking towards certain directions that we as a council and a cabinet believe would be appropriate to move forward on. But it also makes it clear that we're going to consult on that focusing of the scope, that we're progressing the schemes for King's Walk and Friarsgate Medical Centre for the next stage of decision making, not locking into the absolute final endpoint. And we're asking people to note the emerging delivery strategy precisely in order to bring out the comments and views that have been brought out and need to be looked at in terms of how we go forward. So I think it's important that the agreements we're being asked to take today are characterised appropriately. We're not locking in. We haven't put ourselves on railway lines that take us inevitably towards one particular destination, but we are clearly setting the way forward with this paper, which I think is needed and is welcome. And certainly I will have no hesitation in supporting it today. This is, you know, if we have to set priorities, this is the one area of the city that clearly needs the most work, clearly needs the most progress. And I'm really pleased to see a paper before us today that is going to help make that happen.
Thank you very much, Councillor Todd. Can I call on Councillor Ferguson, please?
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you again to officers for all the work that they've done, and to Councillor Learning for bringing this paper forward today. I absolutely hear what Wendy Wyatt had to say and agree that the city is, in her words, crying out for a creative quarter. Not only will this help to drive regeneration and change, but it will also help to fuel the economic recovery post-COVID-19. I just wanted to point out to Councillor Mather that the creative industries are far more than the creative makers that she alluded to. They include advertising, architecture, visual art, fashion, textiles, design, music, and digital creativity. I'm also very keen that this part of the development of the King's Walk is progressed quickly to provide that creative quarter for collaboration, employment and opportunity, which is needed now and not several years in the future. I agree there has been much consultation on Central Winchester regeneration. I've lived in the city for over 20 years now, and it's felt like it's been a constant topic of conversation. Yes, there is absolute pressure to get it right, particularly given the history, but the SPD is an important document in helping to ensure that happens, and I'm really glad to see that that is so embedded in our thinking. I agree also with Paul Spencer that there really is now a need to get on for Winchester to embrace change and to ensure that the city develops in such a way that it does actually appeal to a younger demographic. We need to secure Winchester's place and reputation as a great place to live, work, shop and play well into the future. So I welcome the paper. I also welcome the consultation period, because it is important that stakeholders both across the city and across the district understand what's being proposed now, and that they have their say, and importantly, that we build consensus as we move forward. I'm very keen to progress work on the scheme for King's Walk and the Friarsgate work. So I wholeheartedly support this paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ferguson. Councillor Lerney, have you any final comments to make before we move to the recommendations?
No. Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to thank all those who've worked so hard on bringing us to this point. We all acknowledge that we've still got a lot more work to do and a lot more refining to do. There are a lot of questions that still need to be answered, but I think the main thing is we're now able to show progress and a route forward, and I'd like to thank Cabinet for their support.
Thank you very much. Yes, just a few comments from me. I think this is, we're taking a huge step forward here, and I'm absolutely delighted to see the paper before us and the recommendations that it contains. And I'm particularly excited about the ideas around King's Walk. We've already put Coitbury House back into use, or we're well on the way to doing that. And I think the proposals for the Friarsgate Medical Centre too are really exciting. So I'm very, very happy that we've got this report before us today. So Cabinet, I'd like to move to the recommendations on page 5 and 6. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed. Agreed.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you to everyone who's made a contribution to the debate. We've spent 2 hours on it, actually, almost. But I think it was worth it because it is such an important step to take. So thank you very much. I'd now like to move to on to item number 8, which is the review of Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Policy, Phase 2. We had a member of the public, Mr. Ferry, speaking on this earlier, but I'd like to call on Councillor Porter to introduce the paper, please.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I'm a little conscious that we're about 3 minutes off our 2 hours. Do you want us to try and go through it quickly, or do you want us to give us the time that it deserves?
No, I think we should. We'll take our time that it deserves and deal with it today. Otherwise, it rolls it over. We've got a very heavy agenda in December, so we'll deal with it now. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I just would like to say that I'd like to give it some time because this does affect the livelihood of our drivers as well as the convenience of passengers. So I think it does deserve a few moments to just really seriously think about what this brings. Firstly, I just want to say thank you to our officers who have worked on this policy, consulting passengers and drivers, and to reform the policy in view of the impact of COVID-19 on the taxi drivers' businesses. This is the second taxi policy reform, which aims to improve the experience and confidence of for service users. The first policy addressed the safeguarding for passengers and drivers, and this policy is about accessibility and confidence that the vehicle you're getting into is a vehicle that's been approved by Winchester City Council and is in safe and in good condition. It also addresses the Council's plan for reduced carbon footprint, and this policy recommends that by the end of this policy, all vehicles will be EU6 quality by January 2023. In addition, we're supporting the introduction of electric vehicles by allowing the cost of purchase of a new vehicle to be amortised over 15 years. We're also introducing rapid charge points near the station in Worthy Lane and at other points across the district. It also includes the option of allowing smaller disabled access vehicles, which stops the need to use unnecessarily large vehicles being used for journeys that don't actually require them. And Cabinet's fully aware that the pandemic has had a major impact on the use of taxis. Recommendations for this policy were considered by our all-party licensing committee on the 15th of September. And at that meeting, 4 taxi drivers took the time to explain to the committee how the changes would impact their businesses, including Mr. Ferry. The committee agreed the detail, and hopefully we were at that point looking forward to seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. But since then we've gone back into lockdown. Winchester City Council holds regular forums with taxi drivers. A taxi forum was held and their comments were noted. Officers who had listened to the drivers and I met with Councillor Ferguson, our Cabinet Member for the Economy, and Councillor Murphy, who's Cabinet Member for Carbon Reduction, and discussed how we could make some changes that could improve the policy to protect jobs and delay deadlines for the policies which would incur costs but continue on our plea to reduce carbon. This paper sets out the changes which are highlighted in yellow and their recommendation 1, and then the subsequent recommended policy, recommendation 2, with those changes which we recommend today. Mr. Ferry spoke to the September Licensing Committee meeting too, and thank you for taking the time to join us today, Mr. Ferry. I understand you have a very particular issue. School journeys have been severely impacted by COVID-19, and the business model does not include low mileage vehicles. We will continue discussions with you, though I am absolutely assured that our policies are in line with other authorities nearby. And so for that reason, I'm recommending the policy as it stands today. I wonder if Carol Steffenchuk is on the call and may be able to make some comments on the last point about older vehicles with shorter mileage. I don't know if she's still here on the call.
Good morning. Yes, I am.
Good morning.
Thank you, Councillor Porter. I think overall this has been something that officers and members have tried very hard to make sure that we balance the need of a very difficult time for drivers. We know COVID has had a massive impact on the trade, but equally our absolute paramount consideration has to be public safety of the people that are travelling in licensed vehicles by Winchester City Council. The comments by Mr. Ferry we do empathise with. We've had discussions with him at previous forum meetings, as Councillor Porter's referred to, and we discussed it in our meeting following our forum meeting, where drivers expressed concerns of the impact of the policy during this difficult time. Councillors Porter, Councillor Bento as chair of the licensing committee, and Councillor Ferguson for the economy, with officers and our head of service David Ingram, discussed how we can balance this need. We don't want this policy to mean that businesses fail, absolutely not. But equally, we have to make sure that those vehicles, and especially those vehicles that Mr. Ferry provides for school children, vulnerable young adults, they have to be safe, and that is absolutely our priority. And therefore, we do not want there to be a discrepancy, of standard of the type of vehicles that these people travel in daily. Ultimately, the climate emergency has an impact on everyone, and as Councillor Porter referred to, that's one of the main drivers for us introducing an end of life for vehicles. There's a slight difference between end of life for petrol and diesel vehicles, which we proposed at 12 years, and end of life for electric and hybrid vehicles, which is 15 years. And what we're proposing today is that originally that would have been implemented following adoption by Cabinet today on the 1st of December this year, and we're actually proposing that that's delayed for 12 months, so that that gives hopefully a little bit of time for the trade to try and recover from the COVID pandemic. We have discussed this with other authorities in Hampshire. We're not aware of anyone else in Hampshire that allows this, and we acknowledge that Mr. Ferry has referred to a couple of councils that have decided to make a special policy for school contract vehicles, and we have considered that, but I think as we've discussed, that's not something that we've proposed to put in our policy on this occasion. I hope that helps. Councillor Porter.
Thank you, Carol. That's greatly appreciated. As you can see, it's not something we've done lightly, but we do believe that the age of the vehicles is really important to driver safety, well, driver and but particularly passenger safety. So we're putting forward those two recommendations to you. One, that we've made those slight delays to decisions in recommendation 1, which are amendments that make it more financially viable to make the changes, and recommendation 2, which is the full corrected policy. I put that to Cabinet today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Porter. I've got two councillors who wish to speak on this item. The first up is Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chairman.
You are there, okay.
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to speak on this issue this morning. The review of the Hackney and private hire vehicle drivers and private hire operators policy. We are aware that due to the various restrictions brought about by the COVID-19, most of the meetings are now held virtually, and the meeting of the L&R, which was held on the 15th of September, was attended by the operators who would normally are well represented when reviewing this policy. We were represented. My thanks to for their attendance. What I would say, Chairman, is that this paper shouldn't be taken in isolation. It is important that the document of the September the 15th, the licensing report, is read in conjunction with it. Members of the committee were concerned regarding the training and licensing of operators, DBS checks and safeguarding within the city, but the main concern about was the control of the operator's license from outside by operating within our authority. The safety of members of the public is very important for the well-being of our community. I fully support the disability awareness training like other organisations who operate the system, but would expect the training to be renewed every 3 to 5 years to stay ahead of any changes. I think that the pared down version of the policy, which is before us this morning, was agreed by the L&R committee in September, has taken note of the concerns of the operators regarding the additional expenditures that would be involved in bringing the policy into a shorter timescale. Drivers are struggling financially because of the pandemic, with the downturn of the trade as well as the cost of their overheads, etc., which is brought out in the report in 6.4. Concern was also expressed at the meeting on the 15th of September, item 4, that a small working party be formed to look at the challenges facing the taxi trade. However, the membership again was restricted to the ruling group and not cross-party. So much for openness and transparency. This group met, and 6.5 is the report of this report is the outcome, but postponing certain measures which were mentioned in the September paper, relating to wheelchair accessibility, contactless payments, machines, and new livery, due to come in force by June 21. This I fully agreed with the delay by 12 months. One should never forget that openness and transparency is like a two-edged sword, not a tap that can be turned off as and when one wills. I would like to also thank the officers for the work that they have undertaken during the preparation of the updating of this policy. Once again, Chairman, I thank you for the opportunity of addressing the Cabinet.
Thank you very much, Councillor Reid. I now call on Councillor Brooke. You're muted, Councillor Brooke. You're still muted. You're still muting, but we can see you.
me now?
We can. Yes, thank you.
Sorry, my spilt drink incident's gone horribly wrong and made things difficult. Apologies for that. So thank you for allowing me to speak again this morning. I'm pleased to see this review of the Hackney carriage licensing being brought forward for approval today, and I'm especially pleased to hear that that's been in consultation with some of the drivers due to the changes due to COVID. As some of you will know, this review was instigated by the Conservative administration after a very horrific event involving a young female resident from our district who'd taken a taxi from a driver who was licensed in the Midlands. We'd resolved that this review would ensure that taxis licensed by WCC would be clear and obvious, and that licences would only be issued after stringent checks, so as to allow our residents confidence when taking a taxi that their safety is assured as far as is possible by this council. I'm pleased to see that a lot of those changes have been added to this paper today, and note the highlighted ones that have changed since the last airing. And I just wanted to add my support to this paper today and thank the officers for all of their hard work in bringing this forward. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brooke, and thank you for your support. Cabinet, any questions on the paper? No, I'm not seeing any hands up or anything. Any debate? Councillor Porter, would you like to sum up?
I'd just like to say I appreciate the support from Councillor Reid and Councillor Brooke. It was brought forward at that time, and it was with our support at that time. I think it's a very good move to be making sure that our taxis are distinctive. They easily can be recognised as taxis all the way around, and that our accessibility is a continued concern for us, and we are reassuring the public that our taxi drivers will know how to deal with hidden and obvious disability, and we are continuing to work as part of the whole country's efforts to make sure that updated DBSs are held by everybody, and so that people can get into the taxis with confidence. I'm really pleased to recommend this policy, and really pleased to hear the support we have from all sides. And then thank you very much to our officers.
Thank you very much, Councillor Porter. I'd now like recommendations. They're on page 145, and it's to agree the amendments as highlighted in yellow in Appendix 1, and that Cabinet approve and adopt the Statement of Licensing Policy with respect to Hackney carriage and private hire vehicles, drivers and private hire operators as amended, set out in Appendix 1. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
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 Thank you very much. That is agreed, and that concludes the business for today's
Chair, there's
meeting.
one small
okay.
item. Is it the forward plan for December?
Oh yes, my apologies. Yes, we do have item number 9, which is to note the items for consideration at the December Cabinet on the forward plan. Are we happy to note that?
Agreed.
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 Thank you very much. So that really does truly conclude this meeting. So thank you all for attending. It's been a long one, but I think we did need to spend the time, particularly on well, both matters actually, but obviously the bulk of the time was on the Central Winchester regeneration. And thank you to everyone who's taken part, and see you next time. Thank you.